The fire burned low in the center of the village, smoke curling upward into the violet sky of dusk. The council had gathered, warriors forming a semicircle while the elders sat in silence, their faces carved with the weight of judgment. Behind them, settlers who had followed the commotion stood nervously, some clutching their hats, others whispering as though afraid to speak too loudly. At the heart of it all stood Tohani, broad-shouldered and unflinching, his copper skin illuminated by the wavering light. His hair, long and tied with a strip of leather, framed a face of hard lines and unreadable eyes. Beside him stood Ilara, pale, trembling, her dress worn from travel, her arms wrapped protectively around the small bundle pressed to her chest. The baby stirred, a tiny whimper escaping before being hushed against her shoulder. The sound seemed to slice through the silence, drawing every gaze toward the child. An elder leaned forward, his voice gravelly but sharp. "Why does this woman claim you, Tohani? Why does she hold a child that bears your spirit in his face?" The murmurs grew louder. A settler in the back spat into the dirt and muttered, "She's just another desperate girl trying to chain herself to a warrior's name." His words were echoed with snickers, but even the settlers couldn't deny the uncanny resemblance in the child's features. Tohani's jaw tightened. He had faced enemies with rifles, endured the biting winters in the mountains, and watched comrades fall in battle, but this cut deeper. His gaze flicked once to the baby, then back to the elder. "She is not my wife," Tohani said, his voice steady, carrying like steel through the air. "And that child is not mine." The words hung heavy. Ilara flinched as though struck. The crowd erupted into whispers, some shocked, others skeptical. The elders exchanged glances. Ilara's voice broke, desperate but strong enough to pierce the wall of denial he had built. "Tohani, do not do this. You know the truth. You know the blood that runs in him." Tohani refused to meet her eyes. His arms crossed over his chest, his stance defiant, as if sheer will could erase what the people saw so clearly. The baby stirred again, a small fist pressing free of the cloth, reaching into the air as if grasping for someone unseen. The movement did not escape notice. A warrior in the circle murmured, "The boy has his eyes." Another nodded silently, while a few frowned, unsettled by the denial. Ilara stepped closer, holding the child out as though daring Tohani to deny the resemblance face to face. Her hair, once golden, now tangled and dulled by hardship, fell across her cheeks, but her gaze was fierce. "If I were nothing to you, then tell me why I am here. Tell me why you carried me from the flames that night, why you saved me when you could have let me die. Tell me, Tohani." He said nothing. The weight of silence pressed against him. He felt the eyes of his people boring into him, testing his honor, waiting for the truth to reveal itself. But to admit it meant more than claiming a woman. It meant inviting division, judgment, perhaps even exile. His tribe had strict boundaries, lines that were not meant to be crossed with settlers. He had crossed them once. He could not allow the council to see the mark it left. "She speaks lies," Tohani finally said, his voice low but firm. "The child she carries is not mine. Her story is hers alone." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others nodded, eager to accept the denial. Yet the elder's silence was heavier than words, and the settlers' whispers carried a dangerous edge. Ilara's shoulders sagged, but her arms never loosened around the child. Her eyes glistened, reflecting both heartbreak and defiance. "Then let the people see him," she said softly, almost to herself. "Let them see what even you cannot deny." She shifted the baby so the firelight touched his face. A small yawn escaped his lips, and for an instant, the resemblance was undeniable. The sharp cheekbones, the set of the jaw, the dark glint of his eyes. A mirror of the warrior standing across from them. Tohani's chest tightened. For the first time, his resolve wavered. but he clenched his fists at his sides, forcing his features into stone once more. "She is not my wife," he repeated. Though his voice carried a strain, the first did not dot, and in that moment, with the night deepening and the child's presence filling the silence, no one, not even Tohani himself, believed him fully. The denial struck Alara like a blade, yet she did not crumble. The circle of warriors and settlers closed around her, their whispers a storm at her back, but she lifted her chin. Her arms tightened around the child, her heart pounding as though to remind her what was at stake. "Tohani," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "you may deny me. You may turn from me, but do not deny him." Her words rang against the still night, silencing some of the murmurs. The baby stirred, his small cry carrying farther than her voice, as though the earth itself demanded to be heard. She rocked him gently, pressing a kiss to his dark hair before facing the warrior again. The elders leaned forward. They had seen countless disputes, had weighed matters of honor, land, and blood. But this was something deeper. A child's future hung in the balance, and the truth could not be cloaked forever. Alara stepped closer, though every instinct warned her of the danger. She had lived among his people long enough to know their laws. To claim kinship without proof was a crime of shame. To bear a child without acknowledgement meant a life of whispers, of rejection. Still, she pressed on. "I remember the night you saved me," she said, her voice quivering but steadying as she spoke. "The flames of the raid rose higher than the stars. My family was gone, every one of them. And it was you, Tohani, who found me in the ashes." The crowd shifted. Even those who had doubted her quieted to listen. Alara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her words carrying the weight of memory. "You carried me when I could not walk. You fed me when I had nothing. You tended wounds you did not cause. Tell me, warrior, was that nothing? Was I no more than a burden you regretted lifting?" Tohani's jaw flexed, but his lips remained sealed. He had no answer he could give before his people. Alara's voice rose, raw and unflinching. "And that night," her throat caught, but she forced the words forward, "that night when you held me as the cold closed in, when you looked at me not as a captive, not as an enemy, but as a woman, you cannot deny that. Not when the proof is here, in my arms." Gasps circled through the crowd. Some of the warriors frowned, uncomfortable at her boldness. Settlers exchanged knowing glances, some sneering, others softening. The baby, as if summoned by her words, turned his face toward the firelight again, his dark eyes blinking, reflecting Tohani's own. A younger warrior whispered to his neighbor, "The boy carries his blood. Anyone with eyes can see it." One of the elders raised a hand for silence. His eyes, dark and sharp, settled on Tohani. "Is this true?" he asked, not with anger, but with the weight of expectation. Alara stepped closer still, closing the space between her and the warrior who had once been her protector, her comfort, her only refuge in a world of ashes. "You may despise me, Tohani. You may despise what I remind you of. But this child, he is yours. If you deny me, deny me. I can bear it. But do not strip him of his father. Do not curse him to grow without a name." The baby whimpered again, and in the quiet that followed, the sound echoed louder than any argument. His small hand wriggled free of the blanket, stretching outward toward the man who refused to look at him. Tohani's chest tightened. He could feel the eyes of his people pressing down like boulders, waiting, judging. His own memories threatened to betray him, the scent of smoke and rain, the warmth of her hair against his shoulder, the fire that had burned between them in one unguarded night. But he stood like stone, though his voice faltered when he finally spoke. "Her words are stories," he muttered. "The child is not mine." The circle erupted in whispers again, louder this time, divided and dangerous. Some warriors nodded, eager to believe their brother. Others stared at him with doubt, their brows furrowed. The settlers murmured among themselves, some mocking Alara for desperation, others casting wary glances at the boy who so clearly mirrored the man denying him. Ilara's tears finally fell, but her voice did not break. Instead, she pressed her lips to the child's temple and whispered, almost to herself, yet loud enough for all to hear, "If you will not give him a name, then I will give him mine. But know this, Tohani, the truth always finds a way. Even if you bury it beneath pride, the child will grow. And when he does, the world will see whose son he is." The baby let out a cry then, a fierce sound for so small a voice. The circle fell into silence once more, and though Tohani did not move, his hands clenched at his sides, betraying the storm raging within him. The plea had been made. The seed of doubt was planted, and though his lips denied it, his eyes could not. The night air grew heavy, as though even the stars leaned closer to witness the truth unravel. The council fire crackled, spitting sparks into the darkness, its glow spilling across the child in Ilara's arms. The people gathered in a tense circle, warriors standing tall, elders unmoving, settlers murmuring like restless crows. The baby stirred again, his small cries rising above the whispers. Alara shifted, loosening the blanket just enough to reveal his face to the firelight. The crowd gasped softly. The child's features, though softened by youth, bore an uncanny echo of Tohani's. His eyes, deep, dark, unyielding, were unmistakable. They shimmered with the same storm that dwelled in the warrior's gaze. His cheekbones were sharp even in infancy, his lips set with a quiet stubbornness no child should possess. An elder leaned forward, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "This boy carries your spirit, Tohani. To deny him is to deny your own face." Tohani's jaw tightened, his chest rising and falling in measured restraint. He kept his gaze fixed on the fire, refusing to look at the child. Every instinct screamed at him to keep the wall standing, to guard the line he had drawn. Yet the firelight betrayed him, flickering against the curve of his cheek as his composure strained. Alara's voice rang soft but sure. "Look at him, Tohani. Do not look at me, look at your son." The baby cooed then, as though answering her plea. His tiny hand reached outward again, fingers curling in the air, straining toward the warrior who would not meet his gaze. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. One warrior shook his head slowly. "The eyes," he whispered to his brother beside him. "They are the same. No man can deny what blood has marked." A settler's wife in the back clutched her shawl, whispering, "That child will never belong to us." "He belongs to them, through and through." Tohani finally turned his head, his dark eyes locking with the baby's for the briefest moment. It was a glance, no more, but it struck him like a spear. The child's gaze was steady, unblinking, as though the spirit within already knew who he was. For a heartbeat, Tohani faltered. The fire, the council, the whispers, everything fell away. He saw only the boy, and in that tiny face he saw himself. His heart thundered. Memory pressed against him, the night of smoke and flame when he had pulled Ilara from the ashes, the weeks of silence broken by the warmth of companionship, the single night they had shared beneath the stars when duty yielded to desire. He had buried it all beneath denial, but the boy's eyes unearthed it with a single glance. Alara stepped closer, lifting the child higher as though presenting him before all. "He does not need words, Tohani. His eyes speak for him. They carry the truth you tried to bury." The elders exchanged glances, their silence weighing heavier than judgment. One of them, the oldest, stroked his chin and spoke in a voice like wind over stone. "A man may lie. A woman may plead. But a child his face carries no deceit." "We see what we see." The settlers stirred uneasily. Some muttered about scandal, others about danger if the Apache warrior claimed kinship with one of their own. The tribe murmured too, half in belief, half in uncertainty, their voices a tide rising against Tohani's resolve. Tohani's fists clenched. He tried to harden his voice to summon the denial once more. The eyes deceive. A child may look like any man, but his words were brittle now, thin against the evidence glowing in the firelight. Ilara's gaze burned into him. You can lie to yourself. You can lie to them, but you cannot lie to him. Look again, Tohani. Look, and tell me he is not your blood. The baby gurgled softly, as if echoing her challenge. He stretched his arms wide, a sound half cry, half laugh tumbling from his lips. His eyes never left Tohani's, and in that moment the circle knew. Even those who wished to deny it, even those who longed to protect the warrior from shame, could not unsee the truth written in the boy's gaze. The whispers swelled, louder this time, until they became a current too strong to resist. The people did not cry accusation. They only watched, waiting, pressing silently for the warrior to break. Tohani turned from the fire, from Ilara, from the child whose eyes had stripped him bare. His voice, when it came, was low, raw, and trembling with strain. "This changes nothing," he said. "She is not my wife." But the people no longer believed him. The circle around the fire no longer held silence. The baby's gaze had unsettled them all, and though Tohani's denial still echoed, it rang hollow. The whispers rose first in fragments, then in full sentences, swirling like restless wind through the night. "He bares his eyes." One warrior muttered. "Then why deny him?" Another asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "He breaks our laws if it is true," someone else hissed. Among the settlers the reaction was sharper, tinged with scorn. A man spat in the dirt. "She's clever, that one. Weaving stories just to bind herself to a warrior's name." His wife tugged his sleeve nervously, whispering, "But look at the boy, Thomas." You cannot deny what the eyes reveal. Tohani stood motionless, a statue carved from stone, yet he felt every word pierce him. Betrayal. That was what they whispered now, not only hers, but his. For what was a warrior's honor worth if he could not speak the truth? The elder's silence weighed heavier than any accusation. They watched him carefully, their lined faces unreadable. They did not press him further, but the tribe's murmurs grew into an undercurrent that could not be ignored. Ilara's face flushed with both anger and shame. She drew the baby tighter against her, her arms trembling with the effort of defiance. Her voice rang out, clear and unafraid. "You call me a liar. You call me desperate. But I stood by his side when none of you did. Where were your whispers then, when he carried me through smoke and blood? Where were they when he saved my life?" Some of the younger warriors looked away, ashamed. They remembered the night she spoke of, though none had dared question Tohani then. A woman of the tribe, her hair braided with bone ornaments, spoke sharply from the circle. "Why did you not remain with your own people, white woman? If he saved you, then go back to them. Why do you force your presence here with your child?" Ilara's eyes flashed. "Because my people are gone, slaughtered, burned. I stayed because I had no one until him." She turned toward Tohani, her words trembling on the edge of plea and accusation. "And he gave me more than shelter. He gave me this child." The baby whimpered, and again all eyes were drawn to his face. Even those who wished to doubt could not deny the truth carved into his features. But others hissed among themselves, unsettled. "She brings shame," one said. "She will divide us," another added. "If the boy is his, then what place does he have here? He is neither us nor them." The settlers whispered too, though their tones dripped with mockery more than fear. Imagine an Apache warrior binding himself to a settler girl, disgraceful. Or foolish enough to fall for her lies, or too proud to admit the truth. Each word pressed. against Tohani's chest like stones. He had fought to protect his people, bled to defend their honor, and now they looked at him not with trust, but with suspicion. The whispers were no longer only about Ilara, they were about him. Ilara saw it too. Her voice softened, but her words cut deeper than before. You protect your honor with lies, Tohani. But what of the honor of your son? Will you let him grow with nothing? No name, no father, only whispers in the dark? Will you let them call him a mistake? The fire cracked loudly, as though punctuating her plea. Tohani's eyes flickered toward the child again. He saw the small fist curled tightly, the eyes unblinking and expectant. His chest tightened, the weight of unspoken truth crushing him. But he forced his face to remain carved in defiance, for he knew what admitting the truth would cost. An elder finally rose, his voice calm but laced with warning. Truth is a river, Tohani. You may build walls to hold it back, but one day the water will rise. If you speak falsely tonight, it will not drown her, it will drown you. The circle quieted, the words settling over them like heavy snow. Ilara stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. Then let the river rise. I will not hide. I will not run. The child in my arms is proof enough. And when he grows, his face will speak louder than both our tongues. The whispers fell into silence again, but the damage was done. Suspicion had spread, not only of Ilara but of Tohani himself. His people doubted. The settlers mocked. And the truth, though unspoken, was etched into the eyes of a child too young to understand the storm he had already unleashed. Tohani turned his face from the fire, his shoulders stiff, his voice hoarse with denial. She is not my wife. But now the people whispered a different word behind his back. Liar. The fire hissed as a log collapsed inward, sparks rising into the night like restless spirits. The circle had quieted, but silence no longer brought peace. It was heavy now, swollen with doubt. The word liar lingered, unspoken but present in every glance turned toward Tohani. He stood tall, his face set in stone, but inside, the walls he had built began to crack. Ilara's voice echoed in his mind, carried on the wail of the child. The truth always finds a way, and with those words, memory came rushing like a flood he could not stop. He saw again the night of fire and blood, the settlers, homestead engulfed in flames, the air thick with smoke and screams. He had not gone there to save her. No, he had gone to scout, to see what remained after the raiders had torn through. But when he stepped into the ruin, he heard the faintest cry, a woman's cry. Broken but alive. Elara. She had been trapped beneath a beam, her dress scorched, her hair tangled with ash. Her eyes had been wide, filled with terror, and when she saw him, she had whispered a single word. Help. He had no reason to. She was not his kin. She was not his tribe. She was a settler enemy, stranger. Yet something within him shifted. Against reason, against law, he had thrown the beam aside and lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, her body trembling, her breath shallow. He remembered the feel of her clinging to him as he carried her into the night, her face pressed against his chest, her whispered gratitude warm against his skin. The memory moved forward days spent hiding her in the caves near the river, tending her burns, bringing her food he could barely spare. At first, she had been silent, watching him with wary eyes. Then she began to speak quietly, cautiously. She told him of her family, of the flames that had taken them, of her loneliness. And slowly, something unspoken grew between them. He remembered her laughter the first time he brought her berries, how strange it sounded after so much silence. He remembered the way she had traced the scars on his arm, whispering, "They made you strong, but they did not make you cruel." And then the night beneath the stars. It had been cold, the wind cutting sharp through the cave. He had given her his blanket, But she had shivered still. She had reached for him, her fingers trembling, her eyes searching his face. He should have turned away. He should have walked into the night and left her to her dreams. But he had not. Instead, he had stayed. Her lips had tasted of salt and fire, her hands clutching him as though he was the last anchor in a world that had torn everything else away. He had told himself it was a moment of weakness, of compassion. But the truth was simpler. He had wanted her, needed her. When dawn broke, he had sworn it would mean nothing. Just one night lost to memory. But months later, the child in her arms proved how wrong he had been. The memory faded, and Tohani stood once more before the fire, sweat beating at his brow despite the cool night air. He clenched his fists, willing his face into hardness, but the images haunted him still. Alara's voice pierced the silence, soft but sure. "You remember, don't you? You remember the night that gave him life." Tohani's heart thundered. He wanted to deny her, to bury the memory, but the truth had already risen in his chest. He could not kill it, only chain it. One of the younger warriors stepped forward, his voice cautious but firm. "We see the boy's face. We hear her words. If you speak false, brother, you shame yourself before the spirits." The elders nodded, their silence heavier now, their eyes demanding a truth he could not bring himself to give. Tohani swallowed hard, his voice rough when it came. "The past is ash. What I remember means nothing. She is not my wife." But even as he spoke, the firelight seemed to betray him, flickering across his face as though illuminating the war inside. The people saw it. Alara saw it. And the child, his child, gurgled softly, staring up at him with eyes that mirrored his own. The memory could not be undone. And the walls of denial, though still standing, trembled with every breath he took. The circle was tense, as though the night itself held its breath. Tohani stood rigid, a warrior carved from stone, but his silence no longer looked like strength, it looked like evasion. The elders waited. The warriors shifted uneasily. The settlers leaned forward, hungry for spectacle. Elara, her arms aching from holding the baby so tightly, stepped into the open space before the council fire. Her eyes glistened, her cheeks streaked with ash and tears, yet she carried herself with the dignity of a woman who had nothing left to lose. Her voice cut through the night, raw and unflinching. "If I was nothing to you, Tohani, if I was no more than a stranger you pitied, then why did you save me? Why risk your life, your honor, your people's trust for someone who meant nothing?" Tohani's jaw flexed. He said nothing. The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling into the dark sky. The baby whimpered in her arms, as if sensing the weight of her words. She hushed him with a gentle touch, then lifted him higher, so his face caught the glow of the flames. "If I was nothing to you," she continued, her voice rising, "then why does this child bear your spirit in his face? Tell me that, warrior. Tell them all." The boy's dark eyes locked on Tohani, wide and unblinking, his small hand reaching outward again. It was as though the child himself demanded an answer. A murmur spread through the tribe. One warrior muttered, "No child lies with his face." Another said, "The spirits do not mark falsely." The settlers whispered too, but their words were sharp, mocking. "She's cornering him. He won't claim her. He can't." Then why does he look at the boy as though he already knows? Tohani's chest heaved. He could feel the walls of his denial crumbling, brick by brick. His people's honor, their laws, their judgment, they all pressed down upon him. But so did the gaze of the child, unyielding and innocent. Alara stepped closer, her voice trembling with anger now. "Look at him, Tohani. Look into his eyes. Tell me he is not yours. Tell me he is nothing. Tell me you will leave him nameless, fatherless, while you pretend you are still a man of honor. The accusation hit like a spear. The crowd stirred, some nodding in grim agreement, others watching Tohani with growing suspicion. The word honor cut deepest of all. A warrior who abandoned his blood, what respect could he command? The eldest of the council rose, leaning heavily on his staff. His voice was steady, ancient as the earth itself. The woman speaks with fire. The child carries your shadow. To remain silent is to betray more than her. You betray yourself. All eyes turned to Tohani. His fists clenched, his knuckles pale in the firelight. He felt the weight of expectation pressing in from all sides. He had denied her, denied the child, denied even his own memories. But now the people demanded more than silence. They demanded truth. Ilara's voice softened, though her eyes burned with defiance. I never asked for your name, Tohani. I never asked for your people's protection. All I ask is that you look at your son and acknowledge what he already knows, that he is yours. The baby reached again, a soft sound escaping his lips. Not a cry, not a laugh, something in between. The tiny hand stretched toward Tohani, fingers curling in the air as though beckoning him forward. The circle stilled. Even the settlers felt silent. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the steady, insistent breath of the child. For the first time, Tohani's eyes betrayed him. He looked directly at the boy, and in that single glance, his mask faltered. The truth was there, plain as the stars above. The people saw it. Ilara saw it. The elders saw it, but his voice, when it came, was still cloaked in denial, though it cracked under the weight of his own heart. She is not my wife, he rasped. Ilara stepped closer still, so near he could feel the warmth of the child between them. Her final words struck like thunder. Then do not call me your wife. But you cannot deny your son. The baby reached once more, his tiny fingers brushing the air between them, as though bridging the chasm Tohani had dug. And the circle knew they had all witnessed the breaking point. The silence was unbearable. It wrapped around the circle like a noose, suffocating, heavy with truths no one wanted to say aloud. Tohani stood there, rooted, every muscle taut as though bracing for a blow. His words, "She is not my wife," still hung in the air, brittle and hollow, but his people had seen his eyes. They had seen the flicker of recognition, the quiet storm of guilt. And no denial could smother what the firelight had already revealed. The eldest councilman struck the ground with his staff, the sharp thud echoing through the night. Words are the wind, Tohani. Eyes are the river, they carry truth whether you wish it or not. You have spoken denial, but your spirit betrays you. The murmurs rose again, swelling like a wave. Warriors looked at each other, some disapproving, some uncertain. The women of the tribe whispered among themselves, shaking their heads, pointing toward the baby. Even the settlers at the edge of the circle could sense the crumbling wall around the proud Apache warrior. Ilara held her ground. The baby nestled against her, calm despite the storm swirling around him. Her voice, when she spoke again, was softer, almost pleading, yet still edged with steel. Tohani, the first, carried him alone. I bled alone. I fought to keep him alive when the world turned its back on us. But I never lied to him. I never hid the truth of who his father is. Look at him. Look at what you've tried to bury. He does not need you to call me wife. He needs you to call him son. Tohani's breath came ragged. He turned slightly, as though to walk away, but the elders blocked the path with their gaze alone. His own people, his brothers, his sisters, his kin were waiting for him to either stand as a man of honor or fall as a coward. The baby stirred again, lifting his little head, eyes glinting in the firelight. And then, as if the spirits themselves willed it, the child made a sound. Da. It wasn't clear, not fully formed, but the meaning was unmistakable. A single syllable, Fragile as glass, yet it shattered Tohani's defenses more violently than any battle cry ever had. The circle gasped. The settlers leaned forward, their smirks faltering. The tribe fell into reverent silence. As though they had witnessed something sacred, Tohani staggered a step back, his chest heaving. His hand, almost of its own will, lifted slightly halfway between reaching and retreating. His eyes locked on the boy, wide and vulnerable in a way Ilara had never seen before. Memories surged through him. The night of fire and passion with Ilara, the way she had whispered his name like it was both a prayer and a rebellion, the way she had clung to him in the storm. And now, the way the boy's eyes mirrored his own. His voice broke when it came, rough and raw. "I cannot deny him." The words struck like lightning. Murmurs rippled again, this time not of doubt, but of recognition. The councilman lowered his staff, nodding solemnly. The tribe had heard the confession they needed. Ilara's knees nearly buckled with relief, though she held herself upright. Tears streamed silently down her face, but she did not weep. She only whispered, "Then do not." "Not any more." The settlers sneered, some shaking their heads, muttering about savages and shame, but their voices were drowned beneath the weight of what had just passed in the circle. Tohani stepped forward, slowly as though each step cost him a piece of his pride. He stood before Ilara, before the child who reached toward him without hesitation, without fear. For the first time, he let himself reach back. His hand trembled as it brushed the baby's tiny fingers. The boy grasped him instantly, small but unyielding. As though he had been waiting for this moment since birth, something inside Tohani broke wide open. The warrior, the stone-faced man of discipline and denial, crumbled. His knees bent, lowering him to the earth before his son. His head bowed, not in defeat, but in surrender to truth, to love, to blood. The circle watched in awe as the proud Apache who had sworn denial now bent before a child. The boy cooed, delighted, tugging at his father's hand as though claiming what was always his. Tohani lifted his gaze at last, his voice rough with emotion, but steady in conviction. "He may not have been born within the walls of my lodge. He may not have been blessed by our ceremonies. But he is mine. My blood, my spirit, my son." The words rang out, final and undeniable. Ilara's breath caught, her heart pounding. For the first time in years, she saw not just the warrior who had abandoned her, but the man who might yet stand beside her. The elders nodded gravely. The people murmured in agreement. And though the settlers sneered, they could not undo what had been spoken. Tohani had reached the breaking point and chosen truth. The air around the council fire shifted. Where moments ago there had been tension, suspicion, and doubt, now there was something else: acceptance, though fragile, like the first dawn after a long night. The people of the tribe leaned forward, their expressions softened. The settlers, restless at the edge of the circle, shifted uncomfortably as though the ground beneath them no longer belonged to them. Ilara stood frozen, watching Tohani kneel before their child. The image seared itself into her memory, his strong, battle-scarred hands held captive by the tiny grip of the boy, the firelight painting them in gold and shadow. For years she had carried the weight of silence, the burden of being unseen. But here, before his people, Tohani had spoken the words she had begged the night for countless times. "My son." The eldest councilman lifted his staff again, but this time, the sound of wood against earth carried not judgment, but blessing. "Then let it be known to the people," the elder declared, his voice strong despite his years. "This child is not nameless. He is blood. He is spirit. He is kin. And no man, no woman, no settler may deny what the spirits themselves have revealed." A ripple of assent moved through the tribe. Some nodded firmly. Some whispered prayers. A few still looked uneasy, but but none spoke against it. Ilara's eyes burned with tears she could no longer hide. She clutched the boy closer, kissing his dark hair, whispering promises that had finally been freed from the chains of doubt. She whispered softly, "You are seen, my love. You are seen." The settlers, however, were not silent. One stepped forward, his voice laced with scorn. "This is madness. You'd accept her and her bastard? You'd let shame sit at your fire?" The tribe's warriors stirred, their hands brushing against their weapons, but Tahani rose to his full height before they could move. His voice was thunder now, steady and fierce. "You call him bastard because you do not understand honor. This child carries more strength in his blood than you will ever know. You see weakness where there is none. He is my son, and if you speak against him, you speak against me," the settler faltered, the fire in his eyes dimming beneath the blaze in Tahani's. He spat to the side, muttered curses, and slunk back into the shadows of his kind. They would not win here. Not tonight. Tahani turned back to Ilara. For a long heartbeat, they simply looked at one another. There was no denial left between them, no words to mask the ache of years lost. Only the truth, heavy and undeniable, standing between them like the fire itself. "Ilara," Tahani said, his voice low but firm, "I cannot change the seasons behind us. I cannot take away the nights you carried the boy alone. But if you will let me, I will not let another season pass where you stand without me." Her lips parted, a tremor running through her. Part of her wanted to resist, to punish him for every sleepless night, every whispered prayer unanswered. But the sight of him, his strength bent not in pride, but in humility. His eyes on her, and their sun broke through the fortress she had built. She stepped closer, placing the baby into his arms. For the first time, Tahani held his son. The boy nestled against his chest as though he had always belonged there. The warrior's face softened. Every line of hardness melted into something new, something unshakable. The people watched, and in their watching, they understood. This was not a moment of shame, but of renewal. The elder's voice rang out once more. "Then let the fire bear witness. What was hidden is revealed. What was denied is claimed. The boy is of us, and so long as this fire burns, no man may speak otherwise." The circle broke into voices of agreement, the tribe's chant rising into the night sky. Even the wind seemed to carry the sound, a song of acceptance that the stars themselves would remember. Ilara leaned into Tahani's side, exhaustion mingling with relief. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe freely. The storm had passed. Tahani pressed his lips to his son's forehead, whispering words only the boy could hear. Then, lifting his gaze to Ilara, he added, "You may never be called my wife by law, but by spirit. You are the only woman I have ever claimed." Ilara closed her eyes, tears spilling freely now. She had not come seeking marriage. She had come seeking truth. And in this fire-lit circle, with their child safe in his father's arms, truth had finally been spoken. Above them, the stars shone unblinking, as though the heavens themselves bore witness. The child stirred, cooing softly, the sound pure and untroubled. For the first time, it did not sound like longing, it sounded like belonging. And so the night ended, not with denial, but with recognition. Not with shame, but with honor. Not with silence, but with truth.